Hello and welcome to this new lesson in which we are going to talk about arrays in C. Now, array is a group of data that holds fixed number of value. All of them are the same type. For example, let's look at this syntax. This is called the array definition. The data type here is integer. It's like defining any variable. Usually when define a variable, we write int x equals 0. But in this case, instead of writing this, we are adding these two brackets. And between them, we will add the array size. This is the size of our array. So this line will do this in our memory. It will create 5 variables. Their name will be array, and you can access them using the index. The number that we write here is called index. Now the first thing that you need to know is that the array count starts from 0. So if it has 5 here, means 5 elements. So it's from 0 to 4. Now the array index always starts from 0. It means that the array has elements from element 0 to element 4, as you can see here. Array length must be constant value and it cannot be variable. You cannot add a variable instead of 5 here. You cannot do this int array and add x between the two brackets. This is wrong. It will give you a compilation error. So array, the brackets takes only constant. It doesn't take variables. And this is what happens when we execute this line. It will create 5 variables and we can access them by simply writing array 0, and we will see this in practice in a few minutes. Now, this line creates an array of integer of size 5. Another example here is that the array can be initialized during the time of definition using this syntax. You can write array 5 and then add 2 curly braces here and there and start filling the numbers. Now since it's an array of integers, we will add integer values and you must separate them with a comma, as you can see here. The line must end with a semicolon. Now when you do this, it will create this thing inside our memory. It will create array 0, give it a value of 1. Array 1, give it a value of 2. Array 2, give it a value of 3. Array 3, give it a value of 4. Array 4, give it a value of 5. And this is basically these values. As we already mentioned, we'll start with 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And this is how easy it is to initialize an array during the definition. Now, there are some special cases. When initializing the array with values less than its length, so here we have the length 5, and we only added 2 values. The remaining elements will be initialized with zeros, as you can see here, here, and here. So it's like you wrote 1, 2, 0, 0, and 0. These two are the same. As long as you are not adding the rest of the values, the compiler will autocomplete them with zeros. Now, if you try initializing the array with values more than its length, this will lead to a compilation error. So let's say that this array has 5 elements. Let's go back and we added another comma and 6, another comma and 7. This will most likely give you a compilation error because you are adding 7 elements to an array of 5 elements. So 5 elements, this must be only 5. If you added 7 or 6, it will give you a compilation error. These are few of the things that you must keep in mind when dealing with array. Now, let's talk about accessing array elements. What you need to know here is that all array elements can only be accessed on the same statement at initialization. Like in this example, you can access all of the items, and here we accessed all of these items. Now, the point is, after the initialization, the array can only be accessed element by element. So once initialized and you want to add a new value, you must add it using this syntax. You will write the array name, two brackets, the element number, then the equal sign, and then you can add the value. Again, the array index starts from 0, so you need to take this into consideration when you are writing this number. You can use a variable to indicate for the element index. So this can be replaced with a variable, let's say x, or like array I, and we can add it inside a for loop. This I can be a variable, but this is during the, let's say, accessing of array elements, not during the initialization. Now, if we tried adding a variable inside the initialization line, like in here, it will give us a compilation error. But you can access array elements using a variable that won't cause any error. Other ways that you can access array element is by scanning a variable directly inside an array element. So array elements are being treated like normal variables. So array1 is basically a variable just like x, y, and any other variable. So you can easily access it by simply writing and the element number. In this case, it's array1. You can even use them inside a printf function. As you can see here, we are printing element 0, and we add %d just like a normal variable. And instead of adding x or y, we are adding the array element that we want to print. Now, to make things more clear, we will do this in a practical manner. So let's get started. Hello and welcome. Now, let's add hash include and int main void. Now let's save this. Let's call it array. So it will be 22, if I recall, arrays. See. Now that's it. Let's start by creating a new array. We already mentioned that you need to write the data type, array name, two brackets, array size. So let's create an array, call it array, and make the element number 5. Now there is more than one approach to creating an array. You can create it like that, or you can directly initialize it with values like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or you can simply initialize some of the elements like 1 and 2. As we already mentioned, this will add zeros in the remaining elements. This will add these elements inside our array, and this will not add any element inside our array. The first piece of information that we did mention is that you cannot add a variable here instead of 5. This is forbidden in C. Now if we tried adding a variable, let's say int x equal 5. Let's try to compile this. Now let's add two arrays. Let's see. Now, as you can see, now it did compile correctly, but we have a problem. Now, to see this problem, let's go here and try to print. Let's add some values here into the array that we just created with a variable initializer. Let's print the values inside the array. Array element 0 equal %d, and simply write array of 0, this array, and we want to print this value. Now go back, try to compile, and you'll see that we have an error. Variable sized object may not be initialized, as you can see, and it's indicating this. Access element in array initializer, as you can see, it's not taking the array elements since we have a variable here. Now to fix this, replace this with 5, comment this line, and it should print the value without any problem. As you can see, array element 0 equal 1. And this is the first thing that we need to mention, which is do not add a variable inside the array initialization. Now, the second thing that we need to mention is that if you try to initialize an array, let's comment these two and work on this one. If you try to initialize an array with more than its capacity, so here we have 5 elements and we added 7 elements, now this will cause an error as well. So gcc array, as you can see, exists elements in array initializer, and it's pointing to elements number 6 and 7. So it's indicating that these two elements are extra elements and your array size is only 5. So to fix this error, you need to remove them and make sure that you only add elements with the same number as inside the two brackets. Now, the last thing that we need to mention is the array or accessing array elements after the initialization. To access them, you need to write the array name, 2 brackets, and the element that you want to access. If you want to access the first element, it will be element 0. The second element will be element 1, because we already mentioned that the count inside the array starts from 0 to less than the maximum value, which is 5. So from 0 to 4. So if we want to access element number 3, we need to count 0, 1, 2. So here we need to write 2, and this will help us access this element. We can send a new value to element number 2 here, which is basically the 3 inside our array. We can replace it with 10. And this is how you can access an array element to read the value inside it or to change the value. Now you can also print a value, array element %d, and we can add the array name. As usual, we can add any number. Let's say that we want to print this value. So 0, 1, 2, 3. We need to add 3 here. Now let's comment this line. We don't need it. Now we want to print 2 values. Array 2, since we changed the value, and array 3. Now let's compile and execute. As you can see, the new value in here is 10 and the value in here is 4. We printed values number 2 and 3 which is 10 and 4. Now, if you want to print all of the array elements, you can add these 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now I can go back, compile, and execute. And here we have the 1, 2, 10, 4, 5. 1, 2, 10, 4, 5. Now this was replaced with 3. 3 was replaced with 10 in this line. Now since we are printing using the very same line, but only one thing is changed, which is the value inside the two brackets, we can replace all of these with a for loop. So we can add a for loop. And here we can add int x equals 0, x is less than, x plus plus. Now we can cut this line, paste it here, replace this with x. Now this is the thing that most people fall for, which is the condition inside the if statement. Should they put it 6, 5, 4, or less or equal, or less? So in my case, the best thing that I prefer to do when dealing with arrays is simply adding x is less than and the number inside the brackets. So x is less than 5. This will help us print all the values inside the array except for element number 5, which is an element that does not exist because we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So always when dealing with for loops and arrays, add less and add the number between the two brackets to make sure that you are printing all the numbers inside the array. Let's execute this line. As you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now you can make things even more interesting by adding another %d here to indicate the array element that you are printing. So we will add another variable. If we added x here and try to compile the code, let's screen display, it will print this. Array element 0 is 1, array element 1 is 2, array element 2 is 3, array element 3 is 4, array element 4 is 5, which is a very interactive way of printing array elements. Now to make things more convenient, we need to start the elements with 1 instead of 0. So you can easily do this by adding +1 and add 2 between brackets, or sorry, parentheses. Now compile and run. As you can see, array element 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's more convenient for the end user to see 1. There is nothing called element 0 since he doesn't know that an array starts with 0. So it's more user friendly to start with 1 on the user interface, but you must know deep down, that it starts with 0. And this is how you can easily print the array element. Now in the next lesson, we'll take a good example on how we can take elements into the array and print elements on the display, just like this execution. Now the last thing that I need to mention here is maybe some of you are asking why using arrays to begin with. Why don't we use variables? Now we can use variables. You can go and create, let's say, 5 variables, give them these values, x1, x2, x3, x4, x5, and you can simply print them using 5 printf statements. Now the array was basically created, or let's say used in C, to make sure that you don't waste your time by creating 100 variables of the same data type. Since we are creating 5 integer variables, why don't we create them with single line instead of 5 lines? Why don't we print them with 2 lines instead of printing them with 5 printf statements? Now this appears more convenient when you are creating an array of 100 elements. Let's say that we want to print 100 elements, not just 5 elements. It won't be convenient to create 100 integer variable and keep naming them x1, x2, x3, x4, x5, x6 up to x99 or x100 and giving them values. The easiest way will be to create an array like this of 100 elements and to print it using 2 lines instead of 100 printf statement. And this is why array was created. Now if we try to execute this line, you can see that our compiler printed the first 5 numbers, and as we mentioned earlier, if you haven't added the rest of the numbers, it will automatically add zeros. So here we printed 100 variable with only 2 lines using a for loop. And this is something you can do with arrays, but you cannot do with regular integers and regular variables. So you can either go with this approach, or you can simply use one line of code to create these 5 variables. And this is the main point of using an array to save time, to make sure that you get the best results out of your, let's say, data management, and to easily manipulate, print, take in values inside your array. That's it for this lesson. Thanks for watching. This is Ashraf from Educational Engineering Team.